Hi, this time I am going to try and answer a question made by Ives, one of my viewers. Ives has just started to think about getting into solo role playing games, and he has some questions about secret information, plot related details, and data that the player characters shouldn't be aware of. They shouldn't know about such things, otherwise, the surprises are spoiled. So basically, this has to do with solo modules. That is, taking a module that should be played with a group of players, but you want to play that as a solo experience. So in this video, I am going to talk about if it's possible for you as a with your player character playing as a solo player character, if it's possible for you to take on modules that should have been designed or that were created for several people. And I'm also going to talk about why I prefer the solo game master method, Abraham's method. Please check out the description below for two playlists where I talk about different solo mechanics, different rules, game master and player emulators and such. So let's begin. The main difficulty, of course, with a module that has been designed for with your typical role-playing game group in mind for a traditional experience. There are many things related to the connections, relationships, secrets of the different non-player characters, the adventure sites. Sometimes you have a timeline with specific events. So maybe you are playing this long adventure module that takes several months in game time, not in real time, in game time, and you have a timeline that says when this date occurs or when the adventure reaches this point, this non-player character is going to assassinate, he's going to kill this other player character or non-player character, sorry. Or maybe you have another event that when this date arrives, the adventure site known as this or that, perhaps the Temple of Forbidden Lore or something like that, is going to collapse because there's going to be an earthquake and it's going to swallow the temple, perhaps as part of some sort of curse. Or maybe you reach another part where it says, in this case, the evil king of the undead or whatever is going to raise an army and attack this neighboring village or this city or this town. And so all of those things should be kept a secret, so that the player characters do not know when that is going to happen, how it's going to happen. But relating this or connecting this to Ives' question on how to handle that secret information. Yes, if you are playing that module as a solo experience, if you play it as a solo player character, not as a game master, it's pretty much impossible to do it, to handle that secret information, at least in the conventional sense. You would need to have the capacity, the superhuman capacity of being able to wipe or erase your memory when you are reaching that point so that you are not aware of that information. But at the same time, you will have to be able to recall that information as a game master when the moment happens, to carry out the effects. So for example, in a very surreal hypothetical scenario, let's say that you are reaching the event of a non-player character assassinating another non-player character, you would need to be able to erase your memory, like, oh, I don't know about that, and the date arrives and suddenly you have to recall that that's when the non-player character is going to carry out the assassination. So it's impossible. That's why, but I am going to tell you a way on how I would consider it somewhat possible to handle those things, but we'll get into that in a few moments. First, I want to explain why I came up with Abraham's method. If you haven't seen my video of Abraham's method, remember, please check out the playlist in the description below. Abraham's method came as a form to play those modules because, as I mentioned in that video and in other occasions, I have several adventure modules that my group simply won't play them because they are not interested in that adventure, or they are not interested in the role-playing game for that adventure. And yes, there is no other way to do it unless you're going to wait several years for the right person to arrive. And like I said in my other videos, you can play that module many other ways, like for example online. But if you want more like a tabletop physical experience with players sitting at the table, physical table, sometimes it's not possible. And sometimes maybe you think it's a bit of a hassle to come up with a schedule and get some people together online to play this adventure or that role-playing game. Sometimes there are just some very niche role-playing games or adventure modules, and people simply aren't interested in those modules. Or maybe you have someone who expresses a lackluster enthusiasm, and you know that person is going to, or that group is going to abandon the module halfway or even before that. So once you want to play that module as a solo experience using Abraham's method, you create this artificial intelligence of emulated player characters to take on the adventure. Now, Ives had another question. He asked how you could produce some unbiased results, because maybe some of you think that you could be cheating yourself by coming up with some interpretations that put everything in your favor, in favor of the emulated player characters. But that is not possible because of what I mentioned in Abraham's method and in other videos. There are two main reasons as to why that won't happen. The first one is that with Abraham's method, you get some pretty clear to interpret, or very easy to interpret results. Sorry. So let me give you an example of my ongoing solo campaign. The playlist of that campaign is also going to be in the description. It's a campaign featuring the role-playing game From the Ashes. And for those of you that have been watching some episodes, you know that Corvus faces many different hazards and trials, and even some moments and encounters related to secret information. But when I make the roll to see what he decides to do, the interpretations are quite clear. Let me give you a small spoiler of an upcoming episode. Corvus reaches this section of the pyramid where he starts to hear moaning and lamentations and the sounds of someone being tortured. So there are obviously prisoners up ahead. I made a roll and I obtained something like, I don't remember the exact words. Remember, it's a combination of verb, adjective, and noun. But it basically said something like join locals. So my interpretation of that is that Corvus is going to investigate those the source of those moans and laments, because he thinks that maybe the prisoners are actually locals, are from the same area, and perhaps they want to join up with him. They want to join with him. They want to create a party, perhaps, as a sort of, because they are thankful that he releases them from their prison. So the interpretation is quite clear because of the keywords of locals, join. There was another, I don't remember the other word, but it was a pretty clear result. If the result had said something like avoid scary sounds, then Corvus, that's pretty clear. Your interpretation would be that Corvus is going to get away from those sounds. Maybe he thinks that it's a trap, or that he doesn't have time to free the prisoners to rescue them because he has that mission of assassinating the ruler of that pyramid. And so sometimes, most of the time, the interpretations are quite clear. But if you haven't seen another video, Ives, where I talk about an attitude tracker, it's in the Abraham's Method playlist. Using that attitude tracker, another useful tool, you can get a sort of way to measure if Corvus is going to try something in a constructive way or destructive way, let's put it like that. With the attitude tracker, excuse me, you have a way to determine if Corvus has an enthusiastic and perhaps overly optimistic approach towards the adventure side, or if he thinks that the world is out to get him and he feels quite paranoid, and then he's going to attempt less things. So if you get an ambiguous result, like let's say that you are walking and you see a chest, and you obtain the result of unknown. No, it must be a verb. Let's say observe hidden treasure. So it's not exactly clear if Corvus is going to open the chest or not, because they just tell you that Corvus is going to observe the hidden treasure. There could be several interpretations. Maybe he thinks that there is another hidden treasure in another part of that same room, or further ahead, up ahead. So what you would do, you would take a look at the attitude tracker, and if Corvus thinks that the dungeon is a safe environment, he's probably going to open the chest because he thinks there is a hidden treasure inside. But if you have a negative attitude, maybe Corvus is going to avoid that because he thinks there could be some hidden thing that is going to harm him or something like that, and that there is some sort of some other hidden treasure or valuable item or artifact in some other place, like I mentioned earlier. So it's all about using that attitude tracker, Ives, using that way to measure if Corvus is going to attempt something or not. If Corvus thinks there's going to be a positive outcome of attempting something, or avoiding something altogether, in case he feels, like I said, worried or paranoid about the adventure environment. Now let's talk about if it's possible to run an adventure module that has been designed with a traditional RPG group in mind, if you want to play that as a solo player character. I've seen a few methods throughout the years, and I found them quite lacking because of the secret information. There are just so many things related to the intrigues, the plot lines, what's behind that door, where is that treasure or artifact, what sorts of special attacks a monster is going to use or employ, what non-player characters or beasts are located in a particular section, etc. There's just so much that is going to spoil the fun for you. I've seen some methods that tell you that you should read the module little by little and then just handle the situations as they present themselves to you. But it feels more like a pre-planned play or a sort of television show that way. It feels like, yes, because you already know what's going to happen. When you start to read about that ambush or that hidden compartment or portal, it feels like you're just playing along with no choice on the matter. You won't feel surprised. It feels like it's just everything is really going on rails. There are some that probably enjoy that sort of style, but I do not. When I first started to experiment on running a module on my own, the first time I was like, oh, you can do this, but then it felt quite lackluster because I didn't feel surprised. And if we take that other method that I mentioned as a reference, you simply cannot handle perhaps there is an adventure that has a lot of political intrigue, all sorts of webs of lies and truths and hidden meanings. It's impossible because all of those elements are connected to several encounters and non-player characters and places and objects at once. It's simply impossible to avoid spoilers. Another method that I have seen when attempting to run a module as a solo experience with you as a player character is one in which you cut up or separate the different encounters by scenes. So maybe you can randomly determine when you are going to take on this scene or this other scene or this encounter, but you already know what those encounters and those scenes entail or contain. So it feels like, oh, now I need to play this scene. It feels like you're part of a theatrical play, like, or like a movie, right? Like you're shooting a movie and you're like, oh yes, scene number 32. In this case, you're going to be fighting some orcs. Oh, next scene, scene number 45. This time you're going to try to jump over that chasm or pit. It feels too much, too planned. It doesn't feel organic in my opinion. So I found all of those methods lackluster. So here is how I would run a solo module. I prefer to run all modules that you purchase yourself, that have been designed with several people at once. I prefer to run them with Abraham's method, because that way you are a game master and the player characters are these imaginary beings that are controlled by an artificial intelligence, and you can surprise them with the different events. You are running an adventure module. In this room there is actually an illusion. It makes it appear as if the room is actually quite small, but it's quite large, and there is an army of hobgoblins behind the illusion. So then you make a roll to see how the player characters are going to react, if they are going to enter the room quite careless, with no precautions taken, or maybe they decide to cast some sort of spell before to break the illusion, or depending on the system, maybe they are going to tell the game master that they disbelieve the illusion, and now they see all of that army, that group of hobgoblins. But like I said, let's go back to trying to run that module as a solo player character. What I would do is to cut up or divide not the module by scenes or by encounters, but butcher everything, cut up everything. If you're already butchering the module, you might as well go the whole way, go completely cut it up. That is, create tables with different non-player characters, another table for different hazards, another table for the types of rooms, another table for plot elements, and that way you are not really going to be running the adventure module as it has been written or planned. You're going to come up with your own version that organically unfolds. So maybe you had this adventure module, you have this adventure site, let's say some mines, the typical mine environment. So there are lots of cavern looking places and some rails and implements and tools that miners would use. And you have this room where it says that a group of, let's say, ratmen are creating a sort of barricade to take care of intruders because that is their lair. And you have another encounter where you have this group of bandits that are taking shelter inside of this mine. They haven't made any preparations, and they are actually busy preparing their equipment, the rations and all of that, to move on as quickly as possible. So as you can see, one group is unaware of potential attacks, and the other one is preparing quite well. But if you divide that by encounter, by scene, it seems too pre-planned. But if you create a table that contains the ratmen and the bandits and something else, another table that lists some scenario elements like barricade, camping equipment, maybe there is some other room with a fountain, and you have barricade, camping equipment, fountain, and then, like I said, you cut up every element of the different encounters, and then when you enter the next room, you make a roll and you start to build that particular encounter picking from the different elements of all of the other encounters. So maybe you get a scene where the bandits are actually the ones that are preparing this barricade, or maybe you find ratmen just sitting next to this fountain of water, or maybe there are some other beings. Maybe you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you get the result of an Umber Hulk, and this Umber Hulk is in the same room where the barricade was built. So now you have the element of Umber Hulk, barricade, but the Umber Hulk wasn't interested in using the barricade. Maybe that barricade was built by someone else, but now you have that combat element to use when you enter that room, because now the barricade, you can use it as cover in case you want to hide from the Umber Hulk, or if you want to attack from behind the barricade. And the Umber Hulk, knowing quite well that it's going to burrow, maybe he collapses the barricade in some way, and it turns into a hazard that the player characters are quite close to the barricade, and it starts to fall on top of them. So I would do that if you want to run a module as a solo experience with you participating as a solo player character or as a group of player characters. I would cut up everything about that adventure, create all sorts of tables and subtables and mini tables with all of the elements to create unique encounters. And maybe in an adventure that had some hidden agendas, like for example in an adventure site there is this prince that is actually in league with the villains of the story, and he's acting as a sort of ally. But you can take that element like traitor or enemy or foe and use it, combine it with other elements plot related to the plot. Like maybe you have another event where there is an unexpected alliance. Maybe you have some other event that is a theft or a kidnapping, and you just create a table with those events. And when you encounter that prince, you make I wouldn't make a roll yet, just yet. You may, perhaps the prince tags along with your group or with your solo character, and you reach a moment where the prince carries out some sort of unexpected action or reveals his intention. So you make your roll. Oh, it turns out that the prince was an enemy. Or you make your roll and you got the result of an ally or alliance. Oh, it turns out that prince actually is a true ally of your character, or he wants to become an ally of this mercenary group over there. Or maybe you obtain the result of theft and it turns out that the prince has stolen something, or that something was stolen from the prince. You can determine that as well with rolls using your favorite tools of choice, your oracles, emulators, etc., whatever you like. So IVES, in that case, I hope this information helps you. There is simply no way to play an adventure module that has been designed for several people that has hidden information or secret information. It's going to be spoiled right away. Instead of that, cut up the different elements. If you want to play it as a single player character or a group of player characters, cut it into different elements: enemies, room features, hazards, plot elements, etc. And then you create the encounter as you go along, or use them when, for example, if you are using Mythic because of the chaos factor, when you get a sort of unexpected event, then you use those tables related to plot elements to see how that plays out. But definitely I would recommend using Abraham's method instead, so that you as a game master, the real fun and the challenge is going to be handling everything that the artificial intelligence characters are going to throw your way, and see the amazing stories that are going to be created because of their results during combat, social situations, avoiding traps, going into these different dangerous sites, etc. So I hope this information was clear enough. Either way, if you have some other questions, or if someone else has any other questions related to this video or any other thing, please let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending drive-thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and please take a look at the playlists. I'm sure you will find many tools and more specific aspects of the different methods in those videos. Well, see you later.